to the Animation Happy Hour,
a podcast where we talk about breaking into the animation industry over a couple of drinks.
All opinions and views expressed in this podcast are solely our own and are not representative of the companies for whom we work. My name is Ben.
My name is Katie.
And my name is Garrett, and we're all currently animators at Disney.
So today, we have to thank everybody. We put out, very last minute, we put out a call for drink ideas for today's topic, and we had so many amazing responses.
Yeah,
so quickly too.
Yeah, there's some great ones. There was one of my favorite ones that from at ScoHud on Instagram was just in general critiquey cocktails or critiquey drinks.
Yeah.
I love. Fantastic.
Love
That's
tiki
great.
Drinks.
We had feedjack instead of feedback, like feed jack.
Oh, that's great.
Okay, yeah,
Very
feed
fun.
Jack and
A lot of fun. G and feed instead of G and T.
G and feed.
Yeah. Assessment, kind of like assessment. I don't know. There were some of them where, you know, we had varying levels of creativity, but we loved them all. And thank you so much
to
those that responded.
Say what Kim Hazel's was, because I really liked Kim Hazel. Thank you, Kim Hazel.
Yeah, Kim's was great. She responded with a drink that's called "This Works, but what if we ... And she said
The classic reply.
it should be called the lateral note.
Yes.
Which
that's a good one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very good.
So
Very
we should actually-
relevant to today's topic.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And it's kind of what we're actually drinking because we're not drinking any of these.
That's right. Yeah. So what did we end up going with, Garrett? You made it for us.
We basically just have a vanilla mint mojito. Or vanilla, by saying vanilla, I just mean a basic mint mojito.
Yeah, I was going to say, I didn't know there.
I didn't taste the hints of vanilla in this drink. Yeah, I spent too long making this, but I hope
Oh, it's
they're
delicious.
great.
Well worth it, as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you.
yeah, but it's not to say that these suggestions weren't great. I think I was just too lazy. I was at the store and I was like, I have some white rum. So
I feel like there's probably some tiki drink that's basically a mojito, right?
yeah, that works. And yeah, so if you couldn't already tell, our episode today is about feedback. Mm-hmm. And this episode's going to be very different because we really don't have much in the way of like a structure for this one. It's more going to be just like a conversation between all three of us. We just wanted to try that out and see how it goes. So we've all written questions that none of us have seen. So it's going to hopefully be a little more organic. Mm-hmm. A little more spontaneous, but feedback, we thought it would be a cool episode because there's so much to talk about with regards to like, you know, when you get feedback in school, when you get feedback professionally in like dailies, and it's such a huge part of our industry and in any like artist industry. Mm-hmm. So there's just so much to talk about with giving it, with receiving it too.
Definitely.
But maybe to kick it off, like just as kind of like an icebreaker for this episode, like, I guess, why is feedback important? I will just raise that question to us three. Ooh. Just as a starter, you know, like, do we feel it's important? Why is it important? I'm curious what you guys think.
Good question.
Yeah.
I have some thoughts right off the bat.
Yeah,
I'll just jump in.
Do it.
I'll say definitely for myself, whenever I'm doing anything, whether it's a drawing or an animation or model or anything, I usually very quickly become blind to big issues that to other people are obvious right away. Mm-hmm. So for me, I love it for just like a quality check to, you know, usually even if I'm not necessarily having what I think, if I'm having like a problem in a particular area, I'll still show it after I've been working on it for like a week or depending on how long the shot is for something, just to say, okay, I've been staring at this for a week by myself. What do you think when you look at it? And yeah, usually it'll reveal some issues or things that could be better.
Totally.
Yeah. And that could be for, you know, there are different categories of feedback too. So that could be for creative feedback, like on the acting or the beats or whatever you have in your animation, or it could be for technical feedback too, which is kind of more craft based and like, oh, here you could adjust the timing or push this pose or whatever it is. So it's always good to have that gut check when you're working on something on your own, and make sure you're kind of generally heading in the right direction for both of those kinds of feedback.
Totally. Yeah. And it's like, I don't know if there is a way to improve without any external feedback, because we could just, I guess you can kind of animate in a vacuum and just do that forever. And I don't know. I feel like there would be kind of like a cap where your skill stops, but then when you get feedback, you kind of learn from it, and then it causes you to grow. And that's kind of the wonderful part about animation, is that you learn from everyone around you. So yeah, I think these are all very valid and good responses to my icebreaker. It's so organic. I didn't know.
No, that's great. In terms of like in the professional world too, so often the feedback is not even necessarily like, oh, here's a way you can grow in your craft. A lot of times it's like, is what you're doing going the right direction for like this bigger thing you're a part of? So whether you're working on a commercial or a video game or a movie, usually there's like a creative head, whether that's the director or the client or whomever, where you'll get feedback a lot just to make sure that what you're doing kind of falls within the grand vision of whatever you're working on. So kind of another category of it that could be applicable.
Yeah, it's not necessarily all about personal growth. It's like just the reality of being in a job. It's like, okay, is this like satisfying the vision of this person? So it's not necessarily. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And then for students, like, you want to make sure that you're growing as a student and learning. And really the only way you can kind of learn what you're not doing, maybe not doing correctly, or you could be doing better or make something stronger. Like, you have to show your teachers and get feedback there. Sometimes show your classmates and get feedback. So in that scenario, it is very much, completely growth-based, just to make sure that you are, continually improving upon your work.
Bringing up the whole student element, I was thinking about this as we were talking about this topic, and I feel like it's the natural tendency of students, and probably the natural tendency of everyone, to be immediately defensive when they get like a note or get feedback, because it feels so personal. You're just like, oh, you're giving a critique on myself. It's not really about my work. So I feel like as professionals, it's kind of like up to us to sort of, you can feel those things, but then sort of like mask it and just go forward and be professional and try to like, just integrate the feedback as best as you can. I mean, have you guys had experiences where like, I'm sure in school and stuff, like it's hard when you get like major notes.
Yeah, I think you're constantly, when you're receiving feedback, for me at least, I have this internal calculation where I'm figuring out how much work the note will be to incorporate while the person's saying it. And it's very hard to turn that part of your brain off. And then from there, you're thinking, oh, will this cause me to go past my deadline, or will I have to throw stuff away? And it is hard to kind of turn that off. But ultimately, I think your brain kind of does this thought loop where you get back to, okay, like this is just in the spirit of making everything better. And usually I feel like we talked about this before, but you very often have a knee-jerk reaction where at the beginning you're like, no, I don't need to do that, or that's a stupid idea, or like I really don't want to do that. And then eventually you gradually realize, once you really think about it, and sometimes once you start incorporating it, that, okay, this is actually a better idea, and it's totally worth incorporating, and you kind of understand where that person's coming from.
Kind of going off of that, actually, I'll ask, have you guys ever been in a situation where like kind of goes hand in hand with what we were talking about with like getting, a whole list of notes in like school or professionally? Have you ever been in a situation where, let's say you're in Dailies and you get there's a lot of conversation, and some of it's like might be a lot of notes, or it's just the director like wondering about if it should be more this way or that way or something. And then you leave Dailies and you're confused, and totally. I'm interested in how you guys handle that then, for when you get feedback and you're not quite sure of like what direction to take now. either as a professional or student.
Yeah, like the too many cooks thing, you know, where you're just like, there's so many ideas. I feel like when that happens to me, I always kind of have like a touch base with my supervisor, and I'm like, it might even be in rounds or something, but I'm like, this happened recently where it was a little bit of that, and I always chat with my supervisor, and I'm just like, hey, this is what I took from the meeting. Do you feel the same way? And usually that's so helpful. That 10-minute meeting that we'll have, then I'm like, oh, okay, like I wasn't really hearing what they were hearing. And, you know, obviously sometimes it can be, there's been times where like you hear different things and you go with like what the supervisor wants, but then what you thought was right. And then you're like, oh crap, like I don't know what to do. Because that's happened. But it's just like, then I guess it's the beast of being involved in a studio where there's so many, like there's like a hierarchy, you know, and everyone has a voice. But that's what I try to do in those situations. Is that what you do, Katie?
Yeah, I think that's usually the first thing I do is talk to the soup and clarify notes. And then sometimes if it's really confusing, I will just do multiple versions and bring it back because I can tell everybody's kind of still figuring out the shot and doesn't really know what they want yet, and maybe it just kind of requires bringing in multiple versions and giving people a spectrum. I've done that a bunch of times actually. It's funny. I remember I had a shot on Frozen 2 where Elsa was falling. This was after Elsa had sort of come back to life and was thawing and falling into the ocean. And they weren't very clear on how awake she should be. And I kind of did multiple versions of how conscious she was the moment she hits the water, just because it was very hard to find the line that they were wanting, because the directors were kind of describing that she's not conscious yet, but then they would act it out in their chairs, and it clearly was sort of like she was, you know, moving her limbs, and that suggests some consciousness. So in that scenario, I did bring multiple versions back, and that helped, and they did kind of pick the most conscious version that I brought back. So, it's a time-consuming tactic, but sometimes it's like the only way forward is to do that, is just say, okay, I don't know exactly what they want, so I'll just give them options.
Especially when they have probably a very specific idea of what they want, and you're like, okay, I feel like if you almost like want the person to be like next to you while you're like animating, so you can be like, tell me exactly what you want.
Yeah.
No, that's a good question, Ben. How do you deal with that? I'm curious.
Gosh, I would say similarly. Yeah. And sometimes I thought what Katie said was really great with doing the different versions. Of course, if there's not time for that, I would say just go for kind of combine what you guys both said. Like, you know, just touch base with a supervisor or something so you don't go in totally alone. And then maybe you can just mock up something quickly. And then I would try to bring it back and say, hey, this is still rough. It's not really like necessarily a step forward. It's just kind of a, you know, the new idea. And before I go much farther with it, I want to see if you feel like this is more in the vein of what you were thinking about. So yeah. But I thought what both of you guys said was great.
What was the worst feedback you've ever been given? And by worst, I mean the most harsh, I guess I would say.
Gotcha.
Sorry to just like throw that to you guys.
It's juicy.
It's a juicy.
I'm trying to think.
Take your time.
I think I know one right off was when I was in school. One of my professors, I think I was falling into that trap that we've talked about on previous episodes, which is where sometimes you're not comparing yourself to like enough people, and you might be like, you just happen to be in class and you're doing like okay compared to your peers. Not really thinking about the fact that when it comes time to apply for jobs, you're going to be competing against not only your peers in that class, but kind of the rest of the world too, possibly. So I remember one of my professors once sat down and looked at my blocking for an assignment, and I was feeling like decently confident about it. but there were like some obvious problems with it, just stuff I hadn't gotten to yet, hadn't like animated the fingers or stuff, like
unnecessary stuff.
Exactly, right. And this professor just said, okay, it's not looking bad, but I would definitely not hire you.
Oh,
I was like, whoa. And it was like a slap in the face. But they were 100% right. And, it's just kind of what I needed to hear at that point was like, no, you need to be producing work or shooting to produce work that you feel, everything you're trying to do should be in service of like your demo reel and getting a job. And, obviously certain things you do just for the learning exercise. So there's space for that. But especially when it comes time that you're, producing shots that you hope will someday get you a job, you need to kind of be thinking in those terms that like, it needs to be at the highest possible quality that you can bring it to. And if there's like obvious problems that even you can see on your own, it definitely means people in the review room will see it. And I don't say that to be like paralyzing or freak anybody out, but I just feel like for myself, I would kind of willingly overlook some things sometimes and be like, it's not that big of a deal. But that like snapped me out of it.
For me, I can't point to any one single time. There are a couple things I could bring up. One is I have been lucky that I haven't had anything like super harsh happen to me in dailies or rounds or reviews. But what I can speak to is I feel like there are times where you kind of get like a lukewarm reaction
or like,
like a lukewarm approval where like they give you notes and then at the end are kind of saying like, I guess I don't have to see that again. And you're just sort of like, when you're a student and you picture an approval, you think,
fireworks.
Yeah, fireworks and confetti and balloons are going to fall from the ceiling. But sometimes, the directors are tired and they've been making decisions all day. And they don't have the most energy when they approve your work. So I've certainly had that happen and you kind of leave and then you're like, wait, did I get an approval? Did that happen? I
the check with your soup.
Like I'll take it. Okay. And then this wasn't harsh and I like agreed with it, but it was sort of difficult to receive. I got like personality feedback that was like, that I should be more confident. And it's difficult to receive because when you're somebody who's insecure, you're like, what does that mean? Like, how do I do that? Like, I can't just, flip a switch and be more confident. But it was sort of like speaking to, I guess things like not second guessing my work in messages or when I present it and giving like fewer caveats and that sort of thing. And it's certainly like a very personal kind of like very subjective thing to measure and to adjust. And it was good feedback because it did kind of make me think like when I send a message twice about like how many caveats I put or how many smiley faces, exclamation points, whatever, and just like try to make sure I'm not sort of shooting myself in the foot in any way. Because sometimes what I was finding when I was younger and a newer animator was I would caveat about something like, I don't know, facial animation or whatever, and then it wouldn't come up and the person reviewing would say, I didn't even notice. So you kind of realize, okay, maybe I shouldn't draw attention to so many things. And like, they kind of know like at this early stage that you're not going to get to facial anim or finger anim or something, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And like, how many times have we been in a situation too, where we caveat something and then like the director mentions it anyways. And you're like, yes. And you don't want to be like, I mentioned this in my caveat. Right. So I get that.
Which isn't to say that you can't caveat, but I just basically kind of simplified and reduced my caveats going in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was really good feedback, but it was kind of like sort of hard to receive.
That's interesting. Bring up the like personality.
Yeah.
Can you change the all of you, please? Not that that's what it was. But
Garrett, do you have a solid story of where?
It's probably similar stuff to you guys. One was just I've gotten like this sucks before from like a employer, and it just like no specifics as to why it sucks,
Gotcha.
but it was just like this sucks, and I think it was just like the person was in a bad mood and just like was being kind of like alpha-y, being like, what are you doing?
Well, it's good for listeners to know that that's out there.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And like, I think we're all in studios now that are very nice. Everyone is like, even if you get a harsh critique, it's like, you're going to, you're not going to feel good after it, but it's not like you're going to feel like personally attacked, but there are so many places where that's not the case. And that is a good reminder for people. Like, you're going to get that. And I guess in that situation, I think I was like, well, what about it sucks? Like, what should I do to change it?
Good on you for like spinning it into, or trying to spin it into a constructive
I didn't know what else to do. I was like, yeah. But there was that one. And then another one in school. I just remember there's this teacher that I had. And whenever he saw something bad in class, like I could tell when he saw something bad is he would direct a question at the student who was showing the work and be like, so Garrett, what do you think is wrong with this? So I've gotten that, and I was like, oh my gosh, like this is like the worst thing. But I think like that it was harsh, but like kind of what Ben was talking about, I feel like it did motivate me to be like, okay, like this is not acceptable. I need to like up my game. So I don't know. Yeah, I think people have different reactions to different types of critique. Like there's like supervisors or heads that are very more like intense. And then there's some that are more nice. And I think people have different reactions to that. I feel like, I don't know, I'm curious about what you guys think about this, but sometimes I feel if I have like a really intense supervisor or teacher or something and they're really harsh, I like that more in some way, because when I please them with my work, I like know 100% that I'm like I'm like nailing that, but I feel miserable throughout it, but I still do better work. And then with someone who's like more nice, I can be more insecure about my work.
Gotcha.
Even though I feel better and I'm like, is this good? I don't know. I'm curious if that's even worth entertaining of that thought.
No, I think you raise a good point.
It's an interesting like topic of giving feedback and what's the best way to give it.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I've definitely been in situations where I have felt like, sometimes with nicer people, I appreciate that they're being nice, but I'm like, okay, do they really mean it's like final, or are they just being nice? Or versus there are certain soups and stuff I've had where they're not being mean, but they're just very open about this doesn't work right now, or like no, this part looks bad, and you just generally know when those people are like, okay, it's okay now, you can final it, you can trust it more. So I totally get that.
I mean, I think there's definitely a spectrum. Like, I don't think you need to be an asshole ever when giving feedback, and you can certainly not hold back notes and give every note that comes to you and not approve something until you really think it's done. But you don't have to be a jerk about it, which, can happen. But I feel like there are a lot of soups and heads that we work with that are good about juggling that line, where they certainly don't hold back giving you feedback and give you drawovers, but they're also, nice and warm about it. But I totally get what you're saying about the opposite end of the spectrum, where someone's super nice and gives you no notes, and then you're kind of left questioning, wait, something's wrong here. I'm sure there's something I could improve on. And then you feel a little suspicious that like, oh, maybe like we're really crunched, so they're not giving as many notes, or so I totally see both sides.
Yeah, and it kind of, this sort of dovetails into the whole compliment sandwich type conversation. I wanted to ask you guys like what your thoughts on it were, and I don't know why we call it compliment sandwich. It's really kind of like more critique sandwich or like shit sandwich, because we don't define the sandwich by the thing on the outside.
That's true. You don't call it a bread sandwich.
Yeah. But what are your, I'm curious what you guys think about the compliment sandwich.
I think I appreciate it. I don't know that it has to be that exact order, but I appreciate a balance of complimenting something and not holding back the critique. I don't know.
Yeah. I guess I'm kind of in the same boat. I feel like you can tell when people are being like super formulaic about it. And it's like, okay, I'm just going to say a nice thing because I have to, and then get to the meat of it. And then I'll just end with a nice thing. So I guess similar to what Katie was saying when you said like, it doesn't necessarily have to be that order. It's like, it doesn't always have to be like the perfect sandwich, but just, I generally do appreciate a little bit of balance, even if it can be like super light too on the positivity. Even if it's like, okay, fix this, and this, but like, I think it'll be like in a good spot, or like, I like the way you're going overall or something like that. And that's usually
like,
enough.
I see what you're going for.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a fun expression. Like just something.
Just something.
Yeah.
Give me something.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you feel, Garrett?
I was going to
do you more like,
no, I completely agree with you guys. I actually am very pro compliment sandwich if done in a genuine way, because even if it is superficial, like I appreciate it, you know, because it's so, I don't know, even we've been in the industry for a while, but getting, you know, a lot of notes can be feel like a personal attack or whatever. But getting just, I don't know, having the sense that, okay, there is something okay about this. There's something good.
Yeah.
I like that.
I think a lot of Europeans in our industry that we work with might disagree. Like I've definitely had conversations where I've talked to European friends and animators and they say, I just want to know the notes. Like you don't have to like waste time like complimenting me on something. Like just tell me the notes. And maybe it's an American distinction where we're a little bit, you know, or we've got a bit of a thinner skin. What would you say? More sensitive. Yeah.
Might be. It's weird too, because like there are some giving notes is such, or giving feedback is such an art, because there are some people who've given me notes and I feel like energized and like excited, and it's almost like fun to get the notes from that person. And then there's others where it's not that way. And like honestly, I feel like that's probably the trick to being a supervisor or something, is like knowing how to do that. I have no idea how to do that. But
on the flip side, fun question, what's the best feedback you've ever received? Or what are your like shining moments that you go back to? Like if you had to fly on a broom in Harry Potter, what is the moment you would
because you
recall?
have to like think about everything. I was like, what are you talking about?
well, I've flown on a broom. I don't know.
Or like your animation highlights.
Yeesh.
Don't be humble.
Nothing has happened yet. No.
What is good feedback? Oh my gosh!
Garrett? I can think of one for you if you.
Ooh.
Oh my god!
We don't have to include it if you're too shy about it or something.
Sure.
But
I can't think of one now.
I'm
so humble.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Oh, really? Tell me about how good I am.
It's funny that you can't think of it, because to me it like came right to mind. I'll probably know immediately. It was such a cool thing. Simon Otto with Cloud Jumper.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I know.
Really, that's like amazing, right? Like,
yeah. Well,
Wait,
you tell it.
What was it?
Well, I might tell it incorrectly, so I don't want to say exactly. But I can like set you up so you don't feel like you're or anything.
Oh my gosh.
But it was like a pretty long, very cool, probably the longest acting shot on a feature you had done up to that point, right?
Yeah,
maybe. For like an actual movie, aside from a test or something.
Yeah, you're talking about the shot where Cloud Jumper comes and lands and then picks up the thing, or which one are you?
No, I'm sorry. Okay, well now I'm talking about.
What are you talking about?
I'm talking about when they're on the mast of the ship toward the beginning of the movie, and the guy's like, "Oh, I'm hurt. I'm very hurt."
Oh,
right? And
yeah.
they react to it.
Yes.
Is that not correct? The road I'm going down?
I think the shot that I recalled was the one where it's like a mechanic shot where he like comes and lifts the like thing, or the ceiling, the net.
Gotcha.
But but yeah, I don't know. Maybe that was a good shot too. I don't know.
Oh God,
I can't say.
I'm going through all the times.
Tell me more. Tell me. Oh man.
Okay, well, what's in my head? Maybe I have the shots mixed up, but what's in my head is that you like showed the initial pass for it, and he was like, "Oh man, it's perfect, it's great," and he like patted you on the back out for it.
I think that was the roof shot.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay,
but both shots are just fantastic.
Yeah.
No, but yeah, that basically the gist of it was like I showed, and Simon Otto was happy with it, so it felt good. And I could, because he's a harder guy to please, I would say, because he was very particular about mechanics, especially with dragons. Like, we had to go through like flight school, which was this 2-week course of like how different animals kind of that we used for the dragons, like how they move and stuff, and how things fly, and the physics of flight. So he was very like particular, and obviously Ben knows, but that shot, it was like a very physical shot of Cloudjumper with his like 4 wings picking up the roof of this like rope roof thing. And I don't know, maybe we can post in the show notes or whatever, but like it was I don't know why I said that. I'm going to cut that out immediately. I hate that. I said that. I'm cutting that out.
I think the listeners are going to want to see
anything in this episode.
I
sound like such an asshole.
I'm laughing.
All of this
because you laughed, not because.
All right. Whatever. We're not cutting because I said we're not cutting. But yeah, it was just a nice moment, and I wanted to think of a moment now with Ben.
And he never washed his back again.
And he was shirtless that day. So
Simon's like, really good shot, but I think you're not supposed to be shirtless in the studio.
Actually, I can't. Katie, do you have one off the top of your head?
Well, recently I had a good one, and it was very nice because we just came off of crunch, so I've been a little tired and a little burnout, but I just started on a new project, which I think has been announced now, the Zootopia Plus series.
Oh, yeah.
For Disney Plus. So I'm working on that, and without going into any specifics on my shots or anything, I just showed blocking pass of my current shots packet, and the head of animation said that he thought I hit a quintessential truth. And that I had discovered something in one of my shots. So that felt really good because I super duper respect this animator and had never worked with him. So I was a little nervous to show and really wanted to impress him. So that was great.
That's awesome.
I'll keep that one. And hopefully I didn't just fabricate that memory and it's not one of those things where you're like just remembering or you heard what you wanted to hear.
He didn't say any of those.
I know. Or like, what if it was a different person and I thought it was him? But anyway, yeah.
That's amazing.
Very nice to hear.
Didn't you show like first look and it got approved? Or is that what you just said?
I showed my 7-shot packet and all of them got approved.
At first look, which is rare. That never happens. Amazing.
This kind of dovetails. Again, Garrett used that word a while ago, and I've been waiting to use it too. I liked it. It's perfect. Dovetails too. I also wanted to bring up, we so often think about feedback as this one-way street where, what's the worst feedback we've gotten, the best feedback we've gotten, how does it make us feel? But giving feedback is incredibly draining as well. Mm-hmm. And you have to kind of be vulnerable to give feedback too, because the person you're giving it to can always look at you weird and be like, what the hell are you talking about? So I think I would love for us to just chat a little bit about your strategies for receiving feedback, or if you've given feedback at any time and you particularly appreciated, or it kind of rubbed you the wrong way, how somebody received it. I think that's super important because especially like working at a studio or something, it's not just one way. Like how you do at the studio is also like how you make the supervisor feel. And, like working together goes both ways, so.
Yeah. Wait, but first you can't just skip.
I know. That's why I was smiling. I was like, Ben, come on.
You have to say your best feedback.
Oh, we can't.
bended.
I saw what you did there.
Got it. I wanted to use dovetail.
No.
Okay.
I knew you were trying to sneak past.
Okay, I'll do a quick one. On Raya, one of the last shots I animated was in the sequence kind of toward the beginning when Sisu is first like awakened and stuff, and there's a shot where she is saying like she's being kind of self-deprecating and talking about herself, but it's one where there's some acting going on, but also a good amount of mechanics because you can see the whole dragon's body. And I like love stuff like that, especially like creature mechanics and stuff. Haven't done a ton of it, but I just love whenever I get the chance to do it. So I met with the supervisor beforehand and chatted with them, and I was like, hey, what are your kind of hopes and dreams for this and whatever. And because the project, the movie as a whole was pretty crunched, I felt like a lot of the research the supervisor for her, for Sisu we didn't get to really delve into it a ton, even though he had done all this awesome like research up front about how he'd like her to move and act. And he took that time to send me like all this reference material he had been cobbling together from like Oliver and Company and Lady and the Tramp and Lion King and all these movies where you have quadrupeds that are acting and stuff.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I did a blocking pass for that, and one of the highlights was definitely just chatting with him about that for the first time, because he was like, oh man, like when we first wanted to do a dragon movie, I was hoping there'd be shots like this in it where you kind of get to balance both the acting and the mechanics. And so that was just, for me, like one of the coolest moments. And the director hated it, but no, I'm just kidding. It was fine. It was fine.
No, it was in the trailer.
Yeah, that's in the trailer. It's such a good shot.
But yeah, just really, and it also just felt so collaborative too, because we had met beforehand and chatted about it. So for me, that was one of my favorite.
That's a great one. Thanks. That's a very good one. And that's a great shot. We should post that.
Post Garrett's.
And we'll have to post Katie's under NDA.
Oh yeah.
Maybe. I don't even know when
maybe
that's
a couple of years,
out.
maybe.
Years.
Someday.
Yeah. But anyway, so now back to what I was trying to ask before.
Oh, right.
Could you guys talk a little bit about receiving feedback and how you do so maybe in a way that you feel like, I feel like I'm kind of fumbling with the wording, but you know what I mean?
Yeah,
gracefully receiving it.
I try to be as agreeable as possible, and I take notes, and I do a lot of like visible nodding and oh sure, oh for sure, yeah. Like I do a lot of little affirmations, I guess, and if I'm ever confused about something, I try not to be shy about saying, oh, do you mind, could we quickly clarify, did you mean this when you mentioned that, or was it more like this, or I'm sorry, I just kind of missed that part, or whatever. And on the flip side, I've given feedback to some students, and I haven't done a lot of live feedback, but generally the only thing that rubs me the wrong way, which I think students maybe are more prone to, and I feel like maybe I was guilty of this when I was a student, it was sort of saying things like, well, I can't do that because I've already done this, or like sort of just disagreeing with the note right off the bat and making it clear that it was kind of more from a place of like not wanting to redo something, which kind of comes off as lazy. Or like, I really meant it this way, or, and it's totally okay sometimes to argue a note, or kind of defend what your intent was sometimes, but it's just a tone thing almost. It's hard to describe.
I'm so glad you're going down that path though, because that basically everything you said was like the intricacies I was looking for. With like, you don't just have to be a bobblehead. And be
you don't have to nod and agree with everything.
But just the way you do it. Or the way you ask for clarification or whatever. Sorry, I'm just reiterating everything you said now. But I think that's great.
There's a lot of children, and a lot of students that I had seen or heard of kind of give the excuse of like the rig can't really do that, so I can't. And I'm like, yeah, the rig can do that. You know, like you can add more of a smile to the, you know, like, I don't know. Yeah.
Or even if you don't feel like it can, I think that's a situation then where it'd be so great to show that you at least tried. You know, it's like, okay, here's what's happening. Here's how it's breaking. I really want us to be on the same page here, you know, versus just preemptively being like, I don't think it's going to work.
Yeah. Sometimes what might be better to say is like, oh yeah, I can definitely play with that. Like this rig can be a little challenging or whatever, but like I can play with that and see what I can come up with. Or yeah.
I actually have something I would love to try. It's maybe a little strange, but I
very curious.
So we've gone back and forth about, you know, giving and receiving feedback, and we will continue to talk about it and just acted out some of the things how we would do it. I would love if we would do a quick role play.
Oh my God.
So my reason is when I was in school, it was always so mysterious what Dailies was like, you know?
Yeah.
And you hear like, oh, you show your shot to the director, but like, what does that mean? How does it happen? So I would love to do a role play if you guys are up for it. You don't have to.
Role play.
Do not consent.
But where... If Garrett's okay with it, he's showing his shot to Katie, the director.
Okay.
And I will be the production coordinator, like running the meeting, running Dailies.
Of course you are. You know, we
can switch if you want.
No, I'm so excited.
Okay. So Garrett, I'll give you a second if you want to like think of like.
So I'm the animator.
You're the animator, and it's whatever.
My shot's horrible, right? Like
it's up to. Well, it's up to the director.
Oh, gosh. Okay.
But and however you want to play it, Katie.
All right, I'll do my best not to giggle, but
okay. Hey, sometimes directors giggle. We can act like it's a funny shot.
I'm gonna laugh at Garrett's shot.
It's like a very dramatic moment.
That's right. But you know, you don't have to describe the shot if you don't want or anything. I would love if it was just like as verbatim as it usually happens in the Dailies room. I think that could be kind of cool for people.
I feel like it'll be very boring for my react. I'm just thinking of how I talk to directors. Like, okay, cool.
Well, that's
But maybe that's good. That's good.
I'm gonna try to milk this as best I can.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
You guys. Well, I mean, even this is a good lesson. Sometimes you show and it takes 45 seconds and sometimes it takes 25 minutes, you know?
Yeah.
Which we'll try to keep ours under
20 minutes. Okay.
But just let me know when you
Garrett, what do you think is wrong with this? That's what you should say. Okay. Wait, so this is like, I'm the animator now and I'm introducing my shot to Katie.
Yeah, so first I will toss it to you because I'm running this meeting here. So I'm the production coordinator. So usually you have like some sort of production person kind of like showing the different shots and
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, all right.
Do I decide like what stage the shot is in and everything?
It's up to you, buddy.
So hold on, let me think of what I'm thinking if I would do a first look or if I'm doing like
really throwing Garrett under the bus.
I know, I'm sorry. I am throwing Garrett under the bus.
No, I like it. I like it.
We'll do it live.
I'm just thinking we can do multiple. I'll do first look.
Okay, cool.
That's all right.
That sounds great. All right. Oh, ha. Good showing, Jamie. Okay, with that. Next, we have Garrett showing a shot from sequence 420. He's actually showing I shouldn't have gone with 420. I don't know.
Blaze all day.
Okay, but I already said it. So it's sequence 420, shots 22 and 23. Garrett, do you have anything to say before we play them?
So my heart rate, as Ben is talking, this is just the internal monologue. My heart rate is rising because I'm feeling like I'm in the moment, which is normal. Every time I show in Dailies, my heart rate goes up.
And I would say, "Hey, Garrett, how are you?"
Be like,
"Yeah,
camera on." Hi, Katie. I'll be like, I usually go, "Hey, everyone. Hey, Katie," and then. Okay, we should do this organically. Sorry, guys.
Okay, I'll start you off again.
Sorry.
So the listeners know. So Katie is the director. She just got done seeing a shot from somebody else. From Jamie. And I'm going to introduce Garrett because he's the next person on the list. So Okay. Okay. Next, we have Garrett showing sequence 420. He has 2 shots, 22 and 23. Garrett, is there anything you want to say before we play him?
Yeah. Hey, everyone. Hey, Katie.
Hey, Garrett. Good to see ya.
Yeah. So this is the first look for the shot where, the grandma has has a big take. I don't know. I was thinking somebody said Ben's laughing.
It's great.
So this is that take that we talked about. I think the last time we talked was an issuing, and you mentioned you wanted it to be really broad and cartoony. So the only caveat is I didn't really do any of the lip sync yet. It's just like the body. So
Okay.
We can take a look at that and let you know what you think.
Cool. Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to cue it up, and we say it plays.
So Ben needs to act out the shot, though.
Whoa, but my face isn't moving.
Can we play that one more time?
Sure.
Oh.
Da-da-da.
All right.
My heart is thumping.
Thank you. Yeah, this is looking really good, Garrett. I definitely, I can see what you're going for. I am thinking, maybe right now she feels really surprised. And I'm thinking maybe she needs just a little bit of a hint of annoyance, because she's just interrupted. And so if we could just walk that line a little more between annoyance and surprised. And, it's really close right now. It's just kind of, tweaking those dials in the face a little bit.
Maybe more of a concerned brow or like a more annoyed eye shape or something would help that.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's something in the eye mask or the eyelids. I don't know. Does anybody else have any thoughts or feel
Need
free
like
to
a
chime
supervisor.
in.
Supervisor.
Yeah, what are you showing? This is awful.
I really like what Garrett did with the body, though. How broad it is.
Yeah, it's really looking
Thank
great.
you so much.
It's just a matter of just hitting that emotion of the annoyance a little more. And I guess I would want to see it one more time if that's okay, if you guys don't mind.
Oh, totally.
But it's super, super close. Yeah, just keep going. And I think that's looking great.
So
Awesome.
I'm the production coordinator again. All right. Well, Garrett, do you have any other questions, or do you think we're good?
No, that was super clear. Next time you see it, I will have addressed that note and hopefully take it all the way home.
Thank you.
Ben's giggling like a little...
I feel like a mad scientist. I feel drunk with power that I've created this situation.
This is the greatest idea.
Gosh.
Having more fun I've ever had.
Very hard to give feedback on a shot you can't see.
I know.
But that was it. Yeah, you guys did incredible. So good. But that was I would
beautiful.
say that was not far off from how Dailies sounds. That was pretty darn, that was accurate.
Now, I will say from the animator's perspective, usually when I'm in this situation now, ironically, even though we're doing like recording a podcast, I felt more at ease here with you guys than in Dailies. I feel like sometimes I'm so nervous. Maybe I have a problem. I don't know if you guys have that too.
Oh, totally. I can hear my heart beating.
Okay.
It's so intense.
Yeah.
I start sweating profusely.
It doesn't come when you see other people show. Everyone seems to look normal. I guess
think we all hide it very well.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
How did
you know what? Frankly, even if you were super nervous, I don't think people would care. Everybody kind of knows that it's inherently awkward and nerve-wracking. So I think people kind of give you the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, especially newer, younger folks, they'll know that. And that's funny.
I like one thing Katie did, which is sometimes directors will do this. They'll be kind of ask the question for the room, and it's usually it's to talk to specifically the supervisors or the head to be like, what do you think? And I wonder if they do that when they're something is wrong, but I don't know what is wrong. And I don't have the language necessarily
Yeah.
And sometimes I don't know how you guys feel about this, but I feel like if you get a note or if you get sort of a vague idea of what the notes are, just something overall isn't working almost. I don't know if I've gotten that where there's just a bunch of little things and there's not a clear thing, and it's just go back to the drawing board, this isn't working.
For sure.
But that was fun. I thank you, Ben.
I'm really impressed with both of you.
Oh, thank you.
This is really good.
We've just done a lot of dailies, I think.
yeah. It's too real.
Related to this question, I wanted to ask you guys, like, my original question was to give kind of the play-by-play of how Dailies works, but since we just did like a scripted version, what I'll tack on to that is sort of how do you guys prepare for Dailies, and like what are you doing when you submit your shots and you set up your Zoom or whatever? Like, can you give that kind of play-by-play of how Dailies works either at home or in the studio?
Ben, you should totally take this one.
Yeah, actually, let's direct this one at Ben.
That's a good question. So generally, I'll get the shot, especially for a first look, to a point where I feel like it's enough is there to communicate my idea or whatever. And then, so I sign it up for Dailies, and then usually, let's say Dailies is at like 3 p.m. So I'll sign it up. I usually like to do it like pretty well in advance, even if I keep kind of chipping away at it in the background. I'll sign up whatever version I have at like 1 p.m. for Dailies. And so then Dailies starts, and you usually have kind of like a list of what other shots are being shown when you're showing and where you fall in that list. So let's say there's 3 people ahead of me. I usually am hanging out in the daily. This right now, it's happening remotely. I'm in the Dailies room and I just have my camera turned off generally on Zoom. If it were in person, I would just be sitting in the room, but just hanging out, not saying anything, just watching. And then the director and the prod people and everybody, they slowly make their way through the list and look at every shot and, give their feedback on it. And then as it's like starting to get closer to me, I usually start rehearsing in my head, like the first thing Garrett said, where he kind of like said where he was with the shot and any caveats and everything. I start doing that. And then when it comes to me, sometimes it gets you into trouble too, because like I'll have like a very specific idea of what I'm going to say in my head, but then if the director says something that like throws me off, like short circuits.
I've been there.
Where it's like, oh, fun shirt you have on. And I was like, I was not prepared for this. So that's usually when the awkwardness comes in. I'm like, oh, I don't know how to react. Got a shirt too, but usually it's okay. And then I'll give a quick any caveats in the intro, and then they play it, and is there? I feel like there might be stuff that I'm missing, but it's generally about how.
I guess one thing I was thinking about for me for this question was like, I feel like I bring a notepad, but then I'm so like blackout and nervous that the notes I take are like gibberish and like really bad handwriting. And sometimes you're in a dark room and then the handwriting is even worse. So something I'll do right after Dailies is then do a much more thorough pass of trying to write down the notes in a neater writing and trying to really remember what everybody said.
That's a good one. Actually, I do that too. And then what I should have said, I also, when I'm preparing my intro and stuff, I usually also in the back of my mind have maybe a couple specific questions if anything came up.
Yeah.
I generally don't lead with those questions, but I just have them at the front of my mind in case, like as we're watching it. If the director's like, oh, did you have any questions? Or if they start touching on something that I was wondering about, then I'll launch into it and be like, oh yeah, actually I was wondering if, maybe this is happening too fast and I need to take time from somewhere else. And
that's true. Sometimes I write down my caveats and my questions just to make sure I hit upon them. But yeah, that's a good point. What about you, Garrett?
It echoes everything you guys said. It's the exact same thing. And I definitely relate to the notes. Where I look down at my notes after Dailies and I'm like, it's like head turn, frame 25, like slow, like, or whatever. And then after I have to like translate it, take like 20 minutes. And I get,
Oh, sorry. I'll just add, like, since you guys are talking about being nervous and that kind of thing, something I'm working on actually like in therapy and on myself is just preparing for Dailies with certain exercises and mantras. Like I'll breathe and like I'll take a slow breath in, hold it for 3 seconds, exhale, and then hold that for 3 seconds, and like try to fill and empty my stomach as much as possible, just like right before, and that kind of helps just calm down your system a little bit.
Totally.
And then if you're like super worked up, there are certain things you can remind yourself of. Like a lot of my therapist was explaining that a lot of nerves kind of comes from you trying to predict the future and worrying about the worst case scenario or whatever it is, or worrying about every single outcome. And you just kind of have to tell yourself, I cannot predict the future and I don't know what's going to happen. So just don't think about it or try to think about something else or distract yourself. And you can tell yourself, if something bad happens, like I'll deal with it then. And I don't need to deal with it now. So
that is a fantastic point. Like, it's a good thing to bring up that the fact that the source of all of this nervousness and anxiety is all just like predicting this future that might not happen. And 90% of the time, because you're so anxious, you're preparing the shot in a way that you're giving yourself this leeway. Like, it's not going to be what you think it is going to be in your head. Like, even if it's a bad showing or something, it's not going to be as horrendous as you're anticipating it to be. So I'm glad you brought that up, because that is the source of the anxiety.
Yeah. And you were talking about like the director throwing you off by making a joke or something. And something I talked with my therapist about was like feeling pressure to be funny and like charming in every review. And she was like basically saying like, you don't have to put that pressure on yourself, and like you can just focus on being pleasant, which comes more naturally to you. And like you don't have like, do you the animators that are more quiet and don't make jokes, like, do we like them any less? Like, no, I feel like we actually like a lot of the quieter animators, like, especially like them because they're quiet. So like, don't worry about it if you're like not making as many funny jokes as the person that went right before you, because it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. I feel like the department appreciates, the breadth of personalities that it has. So yeah, it's easier said than done. I still get really nervous, but working on it. Yeah.
All of us, for sure.
Definitely.
That's a great train of thought.
Garrett, were you going to ask something before I launched into
let me see if I was. I guess this is sort of related. Like, do you guys feel like it's gotten easier for you over the years to receive feedback, or do you feel like you're still on the same like level of anxiety than you were before? Has it gotten worse? Like, I'm just curious the trajectory, like, because I imagine students, if they're just starting out, if it's anxiety inducing, and then they're like hearing these like professional animators who are just also anxiety. Like, I don't know. Has it gotten better? Or Katie said she had some techniques to kind of deal with it, but curious what you think.
It's a good question. Does anything immediately come to mind, Katie?
I would definitely say it's gotten better. Yeah. Like, I think just if you've been at a studio for a little bit, or you've worked with the same people for a little bit, for me, just having like the history of past successes helps dampen the pressure of the current shots or projects. So like, I know that my performance on this shot like isn't going to define me for the people I'm working with. I get noticeably more nervous when it's like new people, new project, because then you feel like, oh, like first impressions or whatever. Totally. But once you kind of get that initial first showing or first, new shot with new project, new leadership, like I feel like I get better about dealing with it. I don't know. What do you think, Ben?
Yeah. No, I was actually going to say very similar things, and I think I still in the moment probably feel a lot of the same feelings, but I'm better at talking myself down more quickly, and a lot of it has to do with like what you were saying. Just you can look back on your history and be like, regardless of what it is, even if like you feel like you're totally striking out on this whole movie and you just don't gel with the director or whatever, you can be like, well, on the last one, I did better. And, so it's not that I'm a bad animator. It's just that, things aren't really gelling right now, or maybe it doesn't have to be whole movies. Maybe it can just be, oh, I'm having a particularly tough time with this shot, but in the past I've done X, Y, and Z. So yeah, I do feel like just experience kind of gives you these tools to dampen or to dull the blade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now I know, certain things about myself. Like, okay, right after a review, I'm going to be pretty distracted or unfocused for, an hour or whatever. And I'll usually like go for a walk, or that might be the time that I choose to do an exercise break just to really like give myself a break and
shake the anxiety away.
Exactly. Shake things out or off. And what do you think for yourself?
It's similar to you guys. I feel like the longer I've been working, the more I've tried to distance like my value as a human with animation. I think Guillermo talks about that in our real episode. And I think that's for me, that's like the number one thing that helps me with the anxiety. Because if I'm anxious in dailies or something, it's because like what Katie said, like, it's like you feel like your shot's going to go poorly. Your mind read, or you're predicting the future. And okay, so if we go down that line of thought, your shot's bad. That means you're a bad animator, right? And then that means, okay, you're going to get fired because you're not doing good. And that means ultimately means you're a worthless person. If you're going down this line of thought, which is so illogical.
Yeah.
But it's like, if I equate value with being an animator, then that incentivizes that line of thinking. But if you just don't feel that way, it really helps. And I think the longer you're in the industry, the more you can separate it because you have more experiences with it. But
and also we one like very logistical piece of advice is we have the luxury of being able to sit in on dailies even when we're not showing, or you sit in for the few shots before or after your own shot, and you just see other animators getting notes, and you realize everybody gets notes. Everyone, even the
best of the best.
Top dogs are getting notes and showing multiple times, and that's just what we do. So you don't have to feel like it's personal or it's just you. It's just part of our job.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, this like it just vaguely connects, but it just reminded me of something that I love, and I might have talked about it on this podcast too before. So I'm just doing everything I can to just take away any validity from what I'm about to say. But I was having a conversation once with Malkin, who was the head of animation on Raya, and it was actually when we were both working on Encanto for a little bit. And I just think part of what adds to our anxiety and what makes it extra hard to receive negative feedback is that sometimes you will see some other animators and you feel like they're not getting as much feedback as you are, or things are going more smoothly. And then I know for myself, I have a tendency to think that it's like easier for them too, where it's like, oh, they're just like knocking this stuff out. And one of my favorite things Malcolm said to me once was like, there are no easy shots, just lucky ones. And it was like my favorite thing. So like if somebody, you feel like you are just having like horrible luck and people are just knocking it out of the park and not getting as much feedback or as many like redos or anything as you are, certainly not to take away from their talent. They, might be fantastic animators, but there is an element of luck too. Yeah. Like if just you and the director gel really well and you seem to have the same taste, and it can go the other way too. And you can just kind of not be on the same page. And for me, that
maybe they haven't even like figured out the shot yet. And they're still kind of figuring out certain story points, and it's kind of happening live while you're working on the shot. That can happen too. Yeah.
But for me, I just love that to like, I don't know, regardless of whether you're doing really, really well or feel like you're doing really, really poorly, there is a little bit of an element of luck that you just kind of have to like let go control of, and it kind of helps take the edge off for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. What is it? There are no hard shots. There's just
no easy shots.
There are no easy shots. I'm just butchering Malkin's beautiful quote.
Awesome.
I'm sorry, Malkin.
Yeah, no easy ones, just lucky ones.
No easy ones, just lucky ones.
Which I love too, because every now and then you get one of those random shots where it's like a head turn with expression change, and like you just can't get it right, you know? And you're like, oh my God, this thing is 32 frames. I'm showing it for the 4th time. Like, what's wrong with me? You know, but you know, it happens.
It's also a reminder too that like just because a shot's going smoothly for an animator, like with the director, doesn't mean with just internally they're struggling with the shot. Like, because just because it's going smooth, the director doesn't mean like they're not struggling with it on their own. Like, it doesn't. There's so many ways a shot can be rough. It doesn't have to just be in Dailies. So.
Yeah.
Because like I've struggled on mechanics on some shots, and probably to the outside it like will look like, oh, that went smooth. And it was like I was struggling the entire time I was animating this.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
I think it'd be worthwhile to revisit the question of what it's like to give feedback. And even if like we haven't really done it that often, like talking about sort of the challenges of giving feedback and what you think they are for the supes we work with.
That's great. And can I add to this?
Yeah,
if it makes sense when whoever is answering. One thing I wrote down is strategies for asking for feedback too, whether you're student or professional, student like cold asking someone, or just if it comes up organically while talking about giving it too. I'd be interested, because maybe they would go together.
I'm sure there's a way. Yeah.
I have I thought of one thing to say about this when I've given feedback like one time. I tend to like to give feedback from like a top-down approach, where it's like I'd start with like the big picture ticket item, like is the idea working? You know, just is it kind of clear? Is there anything you can do to improve that? And then kind of work my way down to more like, okay, then mechanics, kind of like how we did our I think we did like a real review at some point. And I think we might have structured it that way too.
I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. I just feel like it helps me like organize my thoughts, because then it just like depends on because you can give feedback on like anything. But for instance, like if an animator reaches out to me and they're like, hey, I've shown first look, and they like the idea, but just like give me notes. That's different than it's like, oh, I haven't shown anything. Can you give me notes on this? Because if they haven't shown anything, then I'll be like, oh, okay, like I think you can make this idea funnier by doing this thing, versus like, okay, this is kind of locked in. I'm just going to give like notes to plus what they already have. Yeah. So I don't know. Have you guys
see? That's perfect. You did connect them because you're saying like it's important when you're asking the feedback to maybe give a little background about the context behind what you're showing. Yes, thank you.
No, I totally
everything you said, that's great. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of other like things, but if you guys have other things.
Like something that intimidates me about someday, pursuing a supervisor position is just like the emotional toll of giving feedback. And I think I'm somebody who like would be very scared of hurting somebody's feelings or like knowing that you're giving a bunch of notes that might take a long time and that might be making somebody do more overtime and feel very sensitive about all of those things, or making somebody go over their deadline. But then, juggling the greater good question of like, okay, well, this is better for the movie and it's better for the reel. And like, yeah, I just feel like I would be super sensitive about all that stuff. And it's definitely like it seems like it could be very emotionally draining. Yeah.
That's a really good point. It's probably particularly tough as a supervisor too, because you're very well aware of the deadlines as well as like, so like, I don't know what you would do in a situation as a supervisor if you're seeing the shot for like the 10th time and it's like not working. The deadline's like a week ago and you're just like, I want to give you major notes, but we don't have time to address it. So even just that's like not necessarily emotionally draining. I guess that's more like logistically.
Act,
yeah. So I don't know how people do it, but that's hard.
Yeah. I'm sure it's super in cases like that, it's just so specific to
Yeah.
what show you're on, what the budget is, where you are in the schedule. And but gosh, it'd be tough.
And I guess you probably just get practice with it and become a little, not desensitized, but just like more used to it and knowing which things are worth giving and which ones are worth keeping to yourself or whatever. And
like pick your battles type of thing.
Exactly. I imagine. But
yeah, actually I did once listen to a talk where Simon Otto was talking about how he directs his supervisors. So at like DreamWorks, it was like he was the head guy, and then there was people under him called supervisors, and then all the rest of the animators. And he would say to his supervisors, like, don't go for perfect because it's never going to happen. Just like decide on your top 1 to 3 things that have to be done. And then if you get the animator to do all those things and you have extra time, that's great. You can do other stuff, but that's the main thing. So, I mean, obviously that's just one example, but yeah.
Seems like a good way to think about it.
It is just from, I know with the 3 of us, I've talked about it before, like sometimes we'll write these mammoth emails giving feedback and stuff.
Yeah.
And it is so draining. And because like Garrett said, you can just kind of, you can talk about anything because it can be like, well, these kind of like high level things are going on. So maybe tweak X, Y, and Z, but then you could also go into the nitty gritty of like this expression and blah, blah, blah. But then it's like, but then again, if you're kind of changing the idea, maybe that doesn't even apply. So,
right.
And it's just like so hard. But
I feel like for students, a lot of the times they can kind of gauge what level they're at. And if it's still pretty early, it might not be worth them incorporating any specific feedback on the pieces they've already done. And then I make a point to say, these are kind of more things to keep in mind for the next one. And like, I think it's worth just doing another exercise, a completely different one. And, but it is a tough,
that's a really good
tough
point.
call.
On that note, play with like students reaching out. Do you have any strategies or any maybe like either big do's or don'ts for like we have kind of touched in the past on like don't be offended if people don't respond when you're cold asking for feedback or something because like we just said it is really draining sometimes. So yeah, does anything immediately come to mind?
For the student, basically? Asking?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think.
Gosh.
I know I ask without really anything in my head. It's tough.
I'm trying to think of do's and don'ts. Like you said, I think giving context on the pieces and where they are in school is great and what jobs they're interested in.
That's really a good idea. Yeah.
I feel like there's kind of 2 things too, where like you could ask for feedback on one specific piece. And that's a little bit less intimidating. Or a lot of people ask for feedback on their entire demo reel, which is also worthwhile. And then like you can get into the nitty gritties of like, oh, what should the order be? Is there anything I should take off? Gosh,
that's it.
I'm
Well,
struggling to think.
it's interesting. I totally agree with what you just said. And maybe it's good to kind of to combine like what we previously talked about with Garrett before with what you just said. What I loved is that I think maybe sometimes to take a little bit of the pressure off the person, you can try to be a little more specific with what you're asking for. Like, if it's like, okay, here are a couple shots I'm generally wondering about. I don't know, like I'm struggling with this thing or something. Just and say you could still be open to anything, but I don't know, just to narrow it down a little bit. Or if it is the whole reel, be like, I'm mainly looking for like high level reel notes where you're saying like, should I like change the order or anything like that to save the person from spending hours dissecting every single shot. And then maybe in another email later or something to somebody else, you can ask about more specific
else I
things.
should add to the reel that's missing. Or...
Maybe kind of break those up. Because it is a lot just to be like, critique every single shot and the reel as a whole.
Like whatever you can do to alleviate the pressure and the amount of time on the person you're asking is good. And you could offer like totally happy to do this over email if that's easier. Totally happy to hop on a call if that's more time efficient, like whatever makes sense for you. Yeah.
And then I guess also like after you, as a student, you would send the email and then the person gets back to you, definitely be very appreciative of the time that they spend. Cause that I know is a pet peeve I've heard. If someone, spends like all this time writing up critique and then they don't hear from the student or something. I don't know if it's because they're upset about it or maybe they just, I don't know, just basically be kind of appreciative of it. Gosh, that sounds harsh.
Well, I do feel like as a student, it's kind of hard to understand how busy professionals are. Like we just have weekends. Sometimes we
don't have weekends.
Like for us at Disney, there's a good 6 months out of the year where we are working 6 days a week and we are working 12-hour days. And like, we really do not have free time and we're barely, getting to laundry on that one day off. So like if anybody gives you feedback, then it's like definitely a sacrifice. If they schedule a coffee chat with you, it's like definitely a sacrifice. So just being really mindful and appreciative of that is important.
And it's good to emphasize too, it's important to do this, to like reach out to professionals or teachers or whatever for feedback for growth. So it's not to like dissuade people, that everyone's like above, critiquing. We're not saying that at all, but it's just, a reminder to be respectful when you ask in any way. That's what I guess that comes to my mind, but
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And if somebody, like we've talked about this before, I totally get like reaching out to multiple people at the same time just because you don't know who's going to reply and maybe you've tried a bunch of people that haven't replied. But what I would say is if somebody does get back to you, then maybe stop reaching out to others and just focus on that person's feedback for a little while.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, at least not like spamming the entire industry. Because we certainly have come across people who like, we know multiple people have responded to that person and they still sent emails to like every single other person at the studio. So it'd be
like one person will see that I'm the best.
Right.
Yeah. And then the only thing I'll add to this is like if you're a student and you're struggling to get consistent feedback, I would really consider the online school classes if you can afford them because, you're paying somebody to give you the type of industry feedback that you need. And there are some new ones too, like some former Disney people started Kyosil, which I think we've linked before on our Instagram. But I think that online school is way more feedback based and it's kind of more catered towards somebody who's a little more farther along in their career and like has a demo reel but just needs to improve it.
I think there's also sorry, go on.
Oh no, go ahead.
Yeah, I think there's one I just heard of recently too that's like a bunch of Pixar animators and it's something similar to that where it's like an hour a week or something, which maybe we can put some of these things in the show notes.
Totally.
I forget its name off the top of my head, but yeah.
It's another reminder how valuable those kind of classes and resources are because, it's hard sometimes to, take time out of the day time that you might not have to be able to give notes. But
and if you have some money to use towards this kind of thing, I've also, and I think Joe mentioned this, maybe I've also heard of people reaching out to ask if somebody would be willing to be a paid mentor. And do one-on-one sessions. So that could be something where if there's an animator you admire, you could ask them if they're interested in a paid mentorship. And maybe they'd be more open to you there. There's also, Rise Up Animation too. If you are a minority, you can reach out for feedback on that channel as well.
Okay, so I have another couple questions that might be kind of random, quick answers. I'm not sure. We'll see. We'll see how they feel free to answer them as long as...
I'm intrigued.
Okay. So, here's a specific example. What if you like show direct or something for let's say it's the first or second time or whatever, and they just say, I love it. No notes. No notes at all. It's perfect. What comes next? Like, what happens after that?
I guess you would generally work with your animation leadership team to polish and find all the shots. And that's usually more craft-based things where they're helping you perfect arcs and appealing poses and facial and honing the lip sync and really any little thing that comes up, like tweaking eyelid shapes. And but generally you wouldn't change it too much from what the director approves. It's kind of like you're in the home stretch then you just go through your normal polish. But I don't know, anything to add?
The only thing I thought of is that sometimes that doesn't mean you are done, because depending on the director and the head of animation, like sometimes the directors can be way more willing to final something than and you still have to get through the supervisor who actually can be more like opinionated and have more ideas. So depending on the movie you're on, that can be like obviously the greatest thing ever, or it can just be like, okay, that's step one. Now we have to get through step two.
That's true.
But what Katie said is totally valid.
Yeah, that's true. Sometimes I'll have a shot approved by the director, and then I'm surprised by how much the anim leadership team seems willing to change it. Yeah, not in big ways, but just like ways that are bigger than I thought they would take it. But gotten used to it over time.
For sure.
Yeah.
Cool. Another quick one for you. What if you're in dailies and the director asks you to do something you literally don't know how to do it? How do you handle that?
Completely lie. And then ask your supervisor for help.
No problem. That is easy.
I've been there. Or I've been there in issuing too. But you just I think I smile and nod and I'm super agreeable and I say, oh yeah, it sounds great. Like I'll play with that. Like I love that idea, blah, blah, blah. And then I might afterward, if it's something complicated or something, like I don't know how to do it. I'm trying to think of an example without like crossing NDA. I've had shots where characters are interacting with vines, stuff like that, and being issued. I remember thinking like, oh my god, I don't know how to do this. Like this seems really complicated. Afterwards, maybe you pull somebody aside who's done shots like that or similar shots, or somebody who is very technically proficient, and kind of get their take on how would you approach this or how would you set this up. And I often pull similar shots just to like see what other people have done. But I definitely have those moments where my heart drops and I'm like, oh shit, I don't know. I'm like really out of my element here.
Isn't it crazy that we're like as animators expected to just like figure out anything? Like, cause that, like a quadruped jumping and then like swinging, like sometimes you'll get a shot like, and you're like, I don't know what I'm gonna do.
Yeah.
So that's everything Katie said I think is valid.
Fortunately I feel like people are pretty aware of when those shots come up too, and they'll be like, I don't know how you're gonna do it, but
good luck.
I'm excited. And they'll have a good sense of humor about it where they're like, oh, I'm excited to see what you do. Like I'm glad I don't have to do it. People are pretty nice about it, but that's a good question.
That is a good question.
Do you have an answer?
Gosh, no, I think everything you guys said is great. And then, of course, depending how things go, just keeping like production and everybody in the loop to let them know if like, if it is something that's like, impossible or crazy or that you've never done before, I'd be like, I might be a little late on this.
That's a good point. Maybe you'll need more time.
That's a really good point.
So I have just one more of these like rapid questions.
Keep them coming.
And we might have kind of touched on this a little bit, but same thing where I'm just going to throw a scenario at you where what if you're like in dailies or talking to a supervisor or something and they tell you to do something you already tried in a previous version that you didn't show anyone. So like it was an idea you were considering with blocking, you decided it didn't work. So you showed something else, but then they asked for it, which I feel like surprisingly happens a lot.
That's true. Yeah.
That's a really good and specific one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not that your others weren't.
Right.
The other one's
Finally, toward the end of this thing, you can ask some worthwhile questions.
that's a good one.
That's tough. I mean, I feel like I've run into situations where I literally have a movie file saved somewhere and I might ask them to pull it and say, oh, actually, you know what? I have something kind of like that. Maybe we could watch that and talk about it. Or I might just wait until after and not bring it up at all. And then talk to the soup about it and say, oh, like, here's what I did before. Like, I don't know. That's tough. I don't know that I've ever said, actually, I already tried that. It doesn't work.
The only time I would voice that I've already tried something is I have a pretty if I have a pretty strong case for why that thing didn't work. Like if I was like, oh yeah, I tried that thing, but the only problem with it is it covers up the silhouette on this. So if that's fine, like I can go back and do that. But like I feel like 80 to 90% of the time I would just be like, okay, that's what the director wants. I'm just gonna next pass. I'm gonna show them that thing I did and that I thought failed, and maybe then they'll realize that it didn't. Which it's probably better to like have a discussion about it, you know, because
that's a tough call. It does seem very case by case. And like what you just said, the example you gave seems, like totally fine and not like at all confrontational. And to be like, oh yeah, the only thing that came up that caused me pause or hesitation was like, it's going to cover up this other character or whatever.
Yeah. Like if you have like a good reason for why it didn't work rather than like, I just didn't like it. Your direction doesn't work. Yeah. But Ben, what do you think about that?
Like picturing Garrett saying that. I don't like it.
No.
I think that's great. This kind of touches on what we talked about before, or I think Katie was saying, like it's just how you do it. And I would agree with Garrett that I would err on the side of like just be like, okay, I'll do it, and then show the version you had previously had or something, and then if it still doesn't work, you can talk about it then. And this also actually, what Kate was talking about before with like the technical things, like the vines, and then asking after dailies, like if you don't know how to do something, that's not, I love that you said that, and I wanted to add to it, but forgot at the time that it's not the director's problem, that stuff, like how to do something.
Great point.
And so you don't want to bog them down with that. And then usually if you're getting an issuing or you're in dailies or something, there's like anywhere from like 5 to like 90 other people in the room. And you don't want to waste everybody's time, like asking specifically how to do this or that. So I think it's great what you said, to like just be like, okay, I'll figure it out, or like that sounds good in the room, and then spend the time figuring it out with a smaller group later.
Dude, I've totally been in situations where I've like asked the director things where I'm like, why? They have no idea. I'm like, is that asset rigged, director? And I'm like, why did I ask them that?
Yeah, that's the scenario where you just wait and figure it out later on your own.
Yeah. Don't do that.
And I think it relates to what we're just talking about too, with like, if you feel like you've tried something in the past, the directors have so much going on, and it's best just to be like, I don't know. It's just hard to like, if all of a sudden they're directing like, hundreds of artists, and all of a sudden there's this one where they feel like they have to defend everything they say to that artist to get them to do it. Like that's not good. So of course, like Garrett said, there are times when there's like very objective things where it's like, oh, if we do that, it might break this or that's happening around it. So, and maybe it's okay to bring those up, but definitely err on the side of like, okay, I'll just try it and show your previous version or whatever, even if you didn't think it would work, I think.
Yeah.
I
like that.
The only sort of topic I feel like we haven't really super addressed yet is like more high level feedback, like end of show feedback or end of year feedback, or how at Disney we're invited to give our supervisors and leadership team feedback at the end of a project, and like and occasionally during a show you can ask a supervisor for feedback. So do you guys have any thoughts on that? Or I think it'd be good just to bring it up as like another form of feedback that we encounter.
Yeah.
That's a really
good
Or
question.
I guess we
didn't
could
think about
describe it to begin with. So
that.
Yeah, I mean,
who wants to?
it's kind of like a little self-explanatory with what you
Yeah.
were saying. It's like at the end of a show, we'll get an opportunity to fill out this like Google Doc or whatever for different studios. It might be different software, but just to give our 2 cents on what we liked about a particular supervisor, what we thought could be improved, that kind of stuff. And I think that goes also with just like the production as a whole. You can give a note on how the whole movie went, and I'm sure in classes too. I feel like I remember this.
Oh yeah,
We
you
also
could
had that.
give professors feedback.
Give professors feedback, give the class feedback.
Yeah.
And I guess my take on it is probably similar to what we've been talking about with giving feedback on shots. Honestly, it's like, be respectful and have probably like compliment sandwich is a good way to go. Like have something at least nice to say. But if you have a thing that could be improved, just be respectful and don't be a complete dick about it, I think is the number. Be like, imagine if I think when I approach these things, it's like, imagine if the person was in front of you and you're telling them this, you wouldn't be like an asshole about it.
Yeah.
I guess
sure.
it's kind of a common sense type thing, but I that's how I approach it. But curious about you guys.
Yeah, I think that's great for giving feedback. I think that's totally true. As far as for receiving feedback at the end of those, like end of show feedback, generally what happens is they'll give you like overarching and usually same thing. It's usually some sort of like compliment sandwich where it's like, generally it seems like you handle these sorts of shots well, and maybe something you could work on is that, well, for example, feedback I got in the past was maybe you could work on directing the eye a little better throughout the shot. And, if you're not supposed to be looking at this one area of the screen, making sure the character is not moving a lot in that area or something, and just being very conscious of that. So yeah, it's awesome if they get like that nitty gritty with you. And then as far as, that's definitely not the time for you to be like, well, actually, I disagree, because I think
just take it.
That's a situation, where you should totally just take it. And then going forward, that's something, if you're regardless of what you go to, whether it's another movie or game or whatever, you can maybe even bring that up to leadership and be like, oh, this is something I really want to work on. So maybe when they're deciding casting and stuff, they can kind of give you opportunities to work on that stuff. But I don't know, I'm kind of rambling.
Yeah, that's totally. It's just like way more high level feedback, sort of broad and just general growth feedback, and usually kind of discuss your strengths and weaknesses, which would be the notes they give. And they might bring up specific shots and things you did very well or could have been improved in a specific shot. They might bring up personality things, which I haven't really had, because I think we're all pretty agreeable and easy to work with. But they might bring up things like, oh, like this shot went over and like you didn't really communicate with the prod team, and like we needed to know that, or we wanted to have more of a dialogue and communication about that. Maybe, I don't know. Could happen.
It's like also worth noting, if you're able to get this type of feedback, it's pretty amazing, because I feel like, I don't know how you guys feel about it, but since being a professional, there's like, I never usually get feedback like that. So if you are at a studio that does that, it's amazing. Like, because when you're working or when you're in school, it's so like routine to get feedback all the time, and then you just assume it's going to go that way in your professional life, and it just doesn't.
You're right.
It's a void,
like overarching. It's usually so specific to like, okay, in this shot you need to do this, but it's usually not like
your whole career.
You as like an artist.
So it's
a good point.
It's maybe hard to hear some things, but it's actually like really nice if you think about it. If it's just genuinely trying to make you better, especially if you're in a place where you're like kind of comfortable in your job and you're like not at risk for being like let go. Like you're not thinking like, oh gosh, this is going to mean I'm going to get let go or something. But just
totally.
It's good.
Yeah. And maybe like if you're a place where they don't give it, you you could try to be a little like or take the initiative to ask somebody for it and ask pointed questions like, what can I improve upon? Like, what do you think are my strengths and weaknesses? What's kind of keeping me back from getting a raise or getting like a promotion or whatever it is? And you could kind of, or like, how do you see me in the department or whatever? And that stuff's scary, but you know, if you're not getting that information, you do have to ask and try to find out. So, yeah. And as a student too, like you could ask straight up, like, do you think I have a shot at an internship or a trainee program? Or do you think I'm not quite there yet? Or,
God, that's a hard question to answer to as the teacher. Like, that's why I guess whoever you ask needs to be a person that you can trust with their, because a lot of people would probably be like, oh yeah, you know, I think you could get one, you know, like even if they're not.
Yeah.
But I think that's still worthy advice to, you sometimes have to be proactive about your feedback.
Totally.
It's not going to always come to you. Tip jar.
So for today's tip jar, we have one which possibly we have done before, but none of us could remember if we have. So
strong opener.
A tip for us is to write down past tip jar.
Yes. So if it's come up before, we apologize, but we're going to try to be a little more nitty gritty with it. So today's tip is to copy and paste curves for related, I don't even know, anatomical features or things that are kind of connected. So one example would be...
Oh, what a handoff. I thought you were doing the whole thing. Okay. Well, one of them, like a super polishy thing, is that you can take the rotate X of the jaw or whatever you're using to open the jaw, whether it's TY or RX or whatever, and then copy that to the translation of the ears, which might sound weird. But yeah, oftentimes when we're talking, our ears do move a little bit with our jaw. So it's a nice little extra level of polish that... and then you should probably scale the curve down a ton. It should be like really, really subtle, but you'll get a little bit of movement in there, and it'll help.
It speeds things up.
Yeah, you could probably use that on the nostrils too. Sometimes, like, and those moving around or widening or narrowing or whatever.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. There's been situations too where like I have like the TY on the head, and then I put that on the chest, but offset it a little bit, so it's like a slight compression. I mean, that's like certain cases.
Accordion feeling.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll do it with like blinking curves on the lids. I'll copy those to like the brows and get just like a little movement on the brows when you blink or that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what else I might copy paste. Well, there you go. That's
it. We need to keep that exactly as is. Well, there you go.
We were struggling to come up with anything.
I don't know why. We forgot how to animate.
Pretty handy.
Save time. It helps save time.
Yeah. For sure. And that brings us to our monthly social media plug, where we say to follow us on basically our Instagram, because I think we're not really, oh my god, everyone's so giggly.
Sorry,
and we're keeping it in, but we're not super active on Facebook or Twitter anymore, but do follow us on Instagram and message us there. And you can email us animationhappyhour@gmail.com as well if you have specific questions, or contact us on our website, animationhappyhour.com. I'm going to go rogue here and say that we love the reviews you guys are leaving, and I am deciding that monthly we are going to pick a random review to send a t-shirt to.
Wow.
To incentivize.
I don't have the money for that.
To incentivize some more reviews. How do you guys feel about that?
Awesome.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
It's exciting.
And I would add that if you liked this format of episode, let us know too, because this is completely unique. And we had a lot of fun doing it. So just let us know if you like this. We still have plenty of stuff planned. We have like the day in the life of and more stuff.
We're still going to do the other kind of podcast as well, but I think we'll also sprinkle more of these in there.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, that brings us to the end of the episode. This has been Katie.
And Garrett. Thanks for listening. And happy